Hey there! Welcome to my podcast, Like Lightning, where I read my original, fictional stories that you have time for. This episode will be the first in a 3-part series. The story I will be reading in this episode is one I actually finished a little while ago, but I'm super excited to be sharing it with you. It's called The Parasitical Being. Now, let's get started. I welcomed the shimmering glow of the moon through my bedroom window. It was pleasant, unlike the thoughts that drifted through my head. I fell back onto my bed and wallowed in my misery. I sank about half an inch into my mattress before I allowed my mind to reactivate. It had been a rough day, filled with people I didn't want to be around. People who could judge me. I had come home from a costume party where everyone had a better costume than I did, and that surely thought that the uncharacteristically pale and scrawny Robin Hood was insignificant and unattractive. Undoubtedly, they thought my name was terribly off-putting. Trex. What a strange name. It sounded like a cereal brand, the kind everyone knew but no one liked. My life was a battle for approval that I could never win. Feeling defeated, I allowed my eyes to crawl across my room, which was so meticulously tidy and neat. My confused and jittering thoughts contrasted in the order of it all. I glanced over at my sturdy, dark oak desk with some unfinished homework lying dejected on the surface. I thought over how I ought to finish it, but the thought of getting something wrong so overwhelmed me that I couldn't bring myself to complete it. What would my teacher think? What would my friends think? And worst of all, what would my parents think if I began failing in school? I had to tear my mind away from even the possibility of it. My thoughts were swirling, worried, upset, and confused, but I was unable to understand why I felt such overwhelming dread. It was a hurricane, tearing me up from within myself. I sat up, with a pit in my stomach. What was I feeling? It was as though my mind was being violently attacked by a creature of the night. No, not attacked, I thought. More like being held captive, while the creature continued to leech off my mind, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When would that time come, I thought? With haste, I decided since it was late, the best thing to do would be to drift off into a calm and relaxing sleep. Sleep was perfect, for in the world of dreams, you can lose yourself. I immediately pulled up a blanket around myself and finally relaxed. I let my head slowly sink into my plush and heavy pillow. I brushed my brown, soft hair away from my forest green eyes, blinking them rapidly. Exhausted, I fell asleep within minutes. I was floating peacefully through my dreams, enjoying the rest that comes with not having to overthink things. Abruptly, I felt an unexpected tingling that zipped through my body, awakening me. It felt as though a crisp, electrified breeze had brushed itself against my back. I tossed and turned, wanting desperately to fall back into the world of dreams, where my worries were void. As my eyelids once again became heavy, I thought I could hear the trees rustling, which surprised me so much I opened my eyes, not knowing what to expect. What greeted my senses was shocking, to say the least. I was lying on the soft grass of a forest, lush and green, filled with a variety of trees. Verdant pines, vibrant cherry blossoms, and beautiful sweet-smelling maples swayed in the pleasantly mismatched forest. The air was refreshing, and the night sky around me seemed to glow, though there was no moon overhead. This was the most captivating place I had ever set my eyes upon. It looked like what one could never imagine in a lifetime or longer. Only, it seemed so real. Although I was not normally the type of person who enjoyed the process of waking up, I felt energized and ready. I slowly stood and began to excitedly amble on forward. Looking around, this forest seemed to radiate all my wonderful experiences and feelings in life. I wondered why nothing inside my head seemed to rot my thoughts away. Nothing made me sick with dread, and I no longer felt overwhelming confusion. I felt alive. I stood there, soaking it all in. I felt as though a part of my mind that had been cut off before was now regaining circulation. Looking forward, I saw something surprising and unlike anything else in this vast and wonderful forest. It was a tree, completely and unmistakably unrealistic compared to the others. One could hardly miss it, for it was the largest tree I had ever seen. In fact, it managed to throw its mangled branches far above the other trees. However, despite its grand, imposing stature, it was misshapen, hideous, and in every way imaginable. It felt wrong. It seemed to be poisoned by evil. The grotesque tree was an unnatural shade of greenish-brown, and it filled the air with a stench so foul and so horrid, it forced my hurricane of thoughts to rush back, swirling inside of me. I knew it was wrong, but for some unknown reason, I felt a strong desire to examine the tree, to know more. The tree seemed to be beckoning me into itself, with a twisted and loathsome branch. It was pulling me in, and I felt utter horror as I felt myself sink deep into darkness. A moment later, after I regained consciousness, I found myself in a room inside the wretched yet curious tree, where the lurking shadows seemed to outweigh the already dull, shadowed room. Was it only my frantic and panicked mind, or were the shadows actually moving? I was sure, even in the dark, that they were shifting and darting across the wooden walls. Yes, as my eyes began to adjust, I could see the writhing shadows more clearly. As I was watching these creatures slide in a hideous jerking manner across the walls of the hollowed-out wooden room, I realized I had no reason to be afraid of them. They seemed to be confined to their own two-dimensional prison on the wall. I found, however, if I fixated my worries on any one of them for too long, that hideous beast would lash out and attempt to tear me to bits, only to retreat back into its confinement, writhing and squirming all the way back. These little shadows, although ugly, had little effect on me, for they hardly lasted more than a few seconds each. As long as I stayed in the center of the room, I was unlikely to become devoured by these evil beings. Then, my mind, infected and twisted, remembered the one thing I wished to forget. I recalled how I had stumbled and tripped in the locker room this morning, where everyone was able to see my embarrassing blunder. Allowing my mind to sludge through this infectious thought caused my insides to violently twist as I stood there, paralyzed. I wondered why I allowed my own thoughts to poison myself. Just as I began sinking into my dreadful thoughts, I noticed that before me, one of the shadows began to grow. Once it was well over twice the size of any of the other shadows. It started taking shape by oozing out of the second dimension and into the third. On the perimeter of its spindly, squirming tentacles, it glowed a deep, hypnotic blue. Staring at the fully formed shadow paralyzed me. For it was both terrifying and menacing, in a way that both disturbed and filled me to the brim with hatred. It stood before me, wavering like a tree in the wind. Yet, it was nothing like a tree. The only tree which this being remotely resembled was the tree that it made its dwelling in. Without warning, it darted forward, and before I could react, it enveloped me in pitch-black nothingness. All right. Part 1 of the parasitical being is complete. This is my longest episode yet. If you made it this far, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you as a listener. In case you noticed, for this episode, I drastically amped up the audio quality, which, in turn, means I did way more editing. Also, I removed ads from all my past and future episodes because I want my listeners to have interruption-free entertainment. Now that I no longer have ads, I would appreciate it if you could spread the word about this podcast. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and others. To leave feedback or to ask a question, please go to anchor.fm/Chris-Hagedon/message. The link is provided in the episode description. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune in for the second part of The Parasitical Being this upcoming Monday.